Hello, I'm Gabriel Bran Lopez. I'm 25 years old and I'm from Montreal, Quebec. I have a BA in Communication Studies and I've traveled across Canada, the United States, Latin America, Africa, and Europe. I've devoted my life to public causes and I'll be your next great Prime Minister. I believe we now face one of the most serious challenges in the history of Canadian democracy, and I'm going to fix it. Young Canadians don't care about politics. Recent years have seen a huge decline in young voter turnout. Why? Because of apathy, because young people are cynical about government. In 1992, world leaders agreed that governments should consult youth and let them participate in decisions that affect the environment and development as part of the UN Agenda 21. It's an obligation we have ignored, and now young people feel disconnected. It's a painful irony. We live in a time of unlimited connectivity and instant communication, and yet the next generation doesn't understand why it exists, why it's important to them, and why they should get involved. They're disconnected. As Prime Minister, I'll target Canada's youth in order to make our country stronger socially, economically, and politically. I'll reconnect the disconnected generation, and I'll do it in 3 clear steps. We face an economic crisis of daunting proportions. Canada's natural resources have sheltered us from some of the storm. But in coming years, our biggest customers will have less money to spend and will be working to curb their dependence on the resources we sell them. To survive, we need Canadian youth to flock to emerging sectors of the economy: renewable energy, new businesses, and socially sustainable services. A generation of green-collar workers can counteract the coming slump in demand for natural resources. The past 30 years have seen unbridled corporate growth. Multinational corporations joined in a great free market experiment, and that experiment failed. Companies have focused on how to extract value from markets without a long view of the consequences. Instead of extracting value, we need a generation that creates value. We see this happening already across our great nation. In Quebec, university students are creating sustainable funding for youth projects that minimize the impacts of climate change. In Ontario, high school students are launching renewable energy initiatives. In southwestern Alberta, green companies are finding profits for their efforts. But that's not enough. Encouraging young people to get involved in sustainability must be a cornerstone of Canadian politics. As Prime Minister, I'll establish partnerships among students, youth, government, advocacy groups, and the private sector to cut greenhouse gas pollution from buildings, vehicles, and other sectors. From the children of First Peoples to those of the most recent immigrants, we need to strike a new balance so young people across the nation can succeed. Did you know that schools on reserves receive 30% less funding per student than provincially funded schools? That's unacceptable. My government will find a balance that recognizes our wonderful diversity, but gives us equal opportunities. I will work with provincial and territorial governments to implement more civic education in high schools in order to lay the foundation for a lifetime of democratic engagement. I believe education, like healthcare, is a fundamental right for Canadians. But higher education is beyond the reach of many students, and that's a tragedy. An educated population is a long-term investment in our economy and our society. I will make higher education accessible to everyone, especially lower-income Canadians and Aboriginal youth, through more rebate and tax credit programs. But education is not just about the classroom. Learning happens everywhere. We'll harness the power of volunteers, offering in-the-field training for undergrads, graduate students, and skilled youth while helping businesses through a new agency I call the Canadian Youth Engagement Service. This service will partner young people with sustainable projects in Canada that will give them skills they can bring to the workplace. But to really engage youth in government, we'll have to do more. That's why I want to make government accessible to every Canadian with transparency and accountability. For instance, I will abolish fees for scientific and survey data gathered by government institutions, and I will make the access to information process faster and more efficient. Think about it for a minute. We can find information on Google with the click of a mouse, but we can't tell whether politicians did what they said they would. We can search the corners of the world, but we can't tell whether budgets are balanced or whether the people we elected are corrupted by lobbyists or special interests. That's a travesty. If we really want to change the world, we'll need new eyes. Eyes that see the need for sustainable development. Eyes that focus on how to do more with less in tough economic times. And eyes that recognize that technology can flatten hierarchies, reduce bureaucracy, and make government accessible and transparent. Only then will we reconnect the disconnected generation. And as your Prime Minister, that's what I'll do.